Welcome to another lecture on wireless security and troubleshooting. Today we're going to dive deeper into how to secure wireless networks and troubleshoot common issues. Wireless networks are incredibly convenient, but they also come with some security challenges. So we'll try to discuss some of these security challenges, and by the end of this, you should be able to install and configure secure wireless networks and troubleshoot these wireless networks. And we have a reliable and secure environment. So wireless security focuses on some key protocols and methods to keep your network safe from unauthorized access and attacks. There's the wireless or Wi-Fi protected access, or WPA, right? This is if you just use the WPA, which is a weak encryption standard, you don't want to use this one. You probably want to use WPA2, which is an improvement from WPA, which is introduced in 2004 to provide a significant improvement from what WPA was. And if you want to go back a couple one, there's WEP, which is also very weak, right? So WPA2 uses a shared encryption key for all connected devices and relies on AES, or the Advanced Encryption Standard, for more of a robust data protection. However, it still has its own vulnerabilities, which has led to the next protocol, which is WPA3, which was introduced in 2018 to address the limitations of WPA2 as it relates to data encryption. So it's individualized data encryption for each device and for better password protection. So it requires attackers to interact with the network for every password, making the brute force attacks nearly impossible, right? So WPA3 also supports forward secrecy, which ensures that previously captured data remains secure even if the password is later discovered. So more likely, for enterprise authentication, such as WPA2 or enterprise, or WPA3 enterprise, it uses an AAA server, which is an authentication server like Radius or TACAS Plus, to validate user credentials. This method involves a secure process where a master key is shared between the client device and the server to create session keys, ensuring high levels of security. Now, in an enterprise, you might also have guest networks. Now, these guest networks, you're going to want to provide, it provides internet access to your visitors, your customers, without compromising the actual security on the main network. They use separate SSIDs and restrict access to the internet only, preventing guests from accessing some of our internal devices and internal services and data within the company. More than likely, you guys have seen this already. When you log in and when you try to log into an enterprise guest network or enterprise network, you greeted with a window. This window is known as a captive portal, right? It requires users to authenticate through a web page before even gaining access to the internet via a specific website. So it adds another layer of security. And what some organizations might have is, as a best practice, they have some terms and conditions or even some acceptable use policies that you have to agree to in these captive portals. There's a policy called bring your own device, right? So it introduces more than likely having users and employees even bring their devices to work. But this introduces another security challenge which has to be addressed as it relates to wireless security. So devices vary in security levels, especially when employees bring in their devices. It might be different manufacturer, and so there are stuff that has to be done. So to address these vulnerabilities, there is something called Enterprise Mobility Management, or EMM, that segregates corporate data from personal data in order to help mitigate against risk of these devices. Another issue that you might have on a wireless network is something called a rogue access point. And normally you might see evil twin, but these rogue access points mimic legitimate networks to deceive users into connecting to them. This could lead into a lot of data theft and malware installations. Regularly scanning for rogue APs and educating users about the risk are pretty much the key to preventing these vulnerabilities attacks. You might also get deauthentication attacks on a wireless network, which pretty much disrupts the connection purposely to force the attacker or to force the user to lose access, and then you try to reconnect to a network that they control. Monitoring for this type of unusual network patterns and implementing strong encryption helps to prevent these attacks. When we troubleshoot on a network, right, so on wireless networks, it is important that we identify and resolve performance issues as soon as possible. So common problems include like insufficient coverage, channel overlap, and interferences in the network. So these could bring down an entire wireless network. So there needs to be proper authentication. Not well, authentication is one of them, but when we're troubleshooting, we're trying to make sure that there's less interferences, there's less attenuation, and so on. So the actual wireless performance, when we assess the wireless performance, it involves, like we said, we might have to use wireless analyzers to help measure the signal strength and to identify sources of the interferences. So these are all things that we have to take into consideration. When we talk about insufficient wireless coverage, we want to make sure that there's no blockage, no physical blockage, no obstacles, or there's we want to measure the distance between the access points. We want to install more access points if we have to, and use range extenders to optimize the antenna, to optimize the network's performance. We might also have to use antennas and change the antenna's placement to help to extend our coverage. When we have channel overlap and so on our network, it's where an access point uses a similar frequency that causes some sort of interference and reduces on the network's performance. So we want to maintain proper channel spacing, especially on the 2.4 gigahertz band, because a lot of devices use that 2.4 gigahertz band and there might be some channel overlap. This would help to address, and we want to minimize any sort of overlap on our network. Some of the interference issues that we might see, as we spoke about earlier on, is the physical barriers and the degradation of the signals. So we want to make sure that we strategically place our APs across wherever we have across our spaces to reduce any form of interference. And if you have spectrum analyzers, they might be useful to identify sources of electromagnetic interferences within our network that might disrupt our signal. As it relates to roaming and disassociation issues, we want to make sure that we implement a standard called the 802.11k and 802.11r to help improve with seamless roaming. So regularly analyzing these access points, association times, and adjusting the placement can help to mitigate that issue as well. And as for overcapacity, where there are too many devices on a single access point, that will lead to a lot of slow speeds as in the form of congestion. So we want to strategically place multiple access points, setting up client limits and using traffic shaping tools that can help manage the network load across these access points. To summarize this, we want to secure and troubleshoot wireless network that involves understanding and implementing robust security measures to optimize our coverage, performance, and to regularly assess what's going on in the network. Critical